Maya's hands trembled as she stared at the crumpled eviction notice on her kitchen counter. 72 hours. That's all she had left before everything fell apart. Her phone buzzed, cutting through the panic. Emergency babysitting job. Tonight. $200 cash. She didn't even read the address before hitting accept. An hour later, she stood at iron gates that belonged in a different universe. The kind with security cameras and an intercom system that probably cost more than her entire semester's tuition. Maya pressed the button, her worn backpack suddenly feeling like a neon sign broadcasting her poverty. Name. A voice crackled through the speaker. Maya James. I'm here for the babysitting position. The gates swung open silently, revealing a driveway longer than her entire street back home. She walked past fountains and perfectly manicured hedges, each step making her more aware of the hole in her left sneaker. The mansion loomed ahead, all glass and sharp angles, reflecting the sunset like it was showing off. A woman answered the door before Maya could knock. Catherine Whitmore was everything the magazines said. She was tall, elegant, with the kind of face that didn't move much when she talked. Botox or breeding, Maya couldn't tell. Probably both. You're the sitter. Not a question. Catherine's eyes scanned Maya from head to toe, lingering on the backpack. Julian is in the kitchen. He's already eaten. Bedtime is 9 sharp. Do not deviate from the routine. We'll be back by 11. Of course, Mrs. Whitmore. You are welcome to Gilded Heart Stories. This is the story of a little boy, the heir to a multi-billion-dollar empire, but lacks a mother's love. Please stay with me. You will be intrigued by what happens next. Could you please hit the subscribe button, comment, like, share your thoughts, and tell us where you are watching from. There's a list on the refrigerator. Follow it exactly. Catherine pulled on leather gloves that probably cost more than Maya's rent. Richard, a man appeared from somewhere deeper in the house, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing irritably at whoever was on the other end. Richard Whitmore barely glanced at Maya as he passed. She recognized him from the news tech billionaire, venture capitalist, the kind of man who bought companies the way normal people bought coffee. Emergency numbers are on the list, Catherine continued, already walking toward the door. Though I doubt you'll need them. Julian is very well behaved. The way she said it made it sound like a warning. Then they were gone, and Maya was alone in a house that felt more like a museum than a home. She found Julian exactly where Catherine said he'd be, sitting at a kitchen island the size of Maya's entire apartment. He was small for 8, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes that seemed too old for his face. Hi, Julian. I'm Maya. Hello. He didn't look up from the book in front of him. Some thick hardcover about astrophysics that made Maya's head hurt just looking at it. That's pretty advanced reading. Father says I should challenge myself intellectually. The words came out perfectly rehearsed, like he'd said them 1,000 times. Maya pulled out a chair and sat across from him. The kitchen was all marble and stainless steel, spotless in a way that suggested no actual cooking ever happened here. What do you like to read when your father's not assigning homework? Julian's eyes flicked up, just for a second. I don't understand the question. What I mean is, what do you read for fun? He stared at her like she'd asked him to explain quantum physics in pig Latin. Reading is for education. Maya felt something twist in her chest. She thought about her own childhood, staying up past bedtime with a flashlight and whatever library book she'd smuggled home that week. Her mother yelling good-naturedly that she'd ruin her eyes, but never actually making her stop. Want to draw instead? She asked. Draw. Julian's face shifted, something flickering behind those two serious eyes. Hope, maybe. Or hunger. Yeah, I always carry supplies. Maya pulled out her sketchbook and pencils, worn from constant use. I'm not great, but it helps me think. For the first time since she'd arrived, Julian smiled. Small, uncertain, but real. I have supplies too. In my room. Should I get them? Absolutely. He disappeared and returned with an art kit that looked like it had never been opened. The pencils were still in perfect formation, the paper crisp and untouched. They spread everything across the kitchen island, and Maya started sketching the view through the massive windows, gardens and fountains, and the city glittering in the distance. Julian watched her hands move, fascinated. Then, slowly, he picked up a pencil and started his own drawing. At first his strokes were careful, controlled, like he was afraid of making mistakes. But gradually, as Maya kept drawing and chatting about nothing in particular, such as the weird guy on the bus, her mother's obsession, and some true crime podcasts. Julian relaxed. You take the bus? He asked suddenly. Every day? Sometimes twice if I have evening classes. What's it like? Maya paused. What do you mean? The bus. Being around all those people. Going wherever you want. His pencil had stopped moving. I've never been on one. Never. We have drivers. And the helicopter for longer trips. He said it matter-of-factly, the way another kid might talk about riding bikes. The helicopter, Maya repeated, trying to wrap her mind around that being someone's normal. Do you see your mother often? Julian asked, returning to his drawing. Every day? We live together. Well, for now at least. Maya thought about the eviction notice briefly before pushing the thought away. We talk even when I'm at school. She likes to know what I'm learning. She asks about school? Of course. She wants to know everything. Sometimes it's annoying, honestly, but Maya stopped, registering the look on Julian's face. Your parents don't ask? They receive reports from my tutors. Father reviews them quarterly. Julian's pencil pressed harder against the paper. He says education is an investment. It's important to track returns. Maya had no idea what to say to that. What do you tell an 8-year-old whose father talks about him like a stock portfolio? She watched Julian draw, really looked at what he was creating. Not the gardens or the fountains. He was drawing a small house with a woman in the window, smiling. Flowers in the yard. A swing set. That's beautiful, Maya said softly. Julian's hand moved quickly then, pulling a blank piece of paper toward him. He wrote something in careful block letters, glancing toward the doorway like he expected someone to appear. Then he folded the paper once, twice, and slid it across the marble surface. Don't open it here, he whispered, his voice suddenly urgent. Wait until later. And don't tell them I gave it to you. Maya's heart started pounding. Julian, what? Promise me. His eyes locked onto hers, and there was something in them that made her breath catch. Fear. Desperation. Please promise. I promise. He nodded and went back to drawing, but his hands were shaking slightly. Maya slipped the folded paper into her pocket, feeling its weight like it was made of lead instead of paper. They drew in silence for another 20 minutes, the ease from before completely gone. Julian kept glancing at the clock, at the windows, at the doorway. At exactly 9 o'clock, he stood up. It's bedtime. I should go upstairs. Do you want me to read you a story? No. I can manage myself. Thank you for drawing with me, Maya. He gathered his unused art supplies with military precision, returning them to their original pristine state. Then he walked away, his footsteps silent on the marble floor. Maya sat alone in that massive kitchen, hand in her pocket, fingers touching the folded note. Every instinct screamed at her to read it immediately, but she'd promised. She cleaned up her own supplies, wandering through the first floor of the house while she waited for the Whitmores to return. The place was immaculate, sterile, like a showroom rather than somewhere people actually lived. No photos on the walls except professional portraits in the entryway. No clutter, no mess, no signs of an 8-year-old boy except for a backpack by the door, positioned at a perfect 90-degree angle to the wall. The Whitmores returned at exactly 11, as promised. Catherine inspected the kitchen while Richard counted out bills, not making eye contact. $200 in crisp 20s. Julian gave you no trouble? Catherine asked. None at all. He's a great kid. Of course he is. Catherine's smile was sharp. We'll need you again next Thursday. Same time. Unless you're unavailable. Maya thought about the eviction notice. The tuition payment due. Her mother's medication. I'm available. Excellent. See yourself out. Maya walked back down that endless driveway, through the gates that closed behind her with a soft, expensive click. Only when she was 3 blocks away, sitting at a bus stop under a flickering streetlight, did she pull out the note. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. The words were written in precise, careful letters. The handwriting of a child who'd been taught that mistakes were unacceptable. My real mom comes on Thursdays. Don't tell them I told you. Maya read it repeatedly. The paper crumpled slightly in her grip. Her mind raced through everything she knew about the Whitmores, which admittedly wasn't much beyond what everyone knew. Richard Whitmore, self-made billionaire. Catherine, his second wife, married 5 years ago. And Julian. She pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. Richard Whitmore's first wife. It took less than 30 seconds to find the articles. Caroline Whitmore, deceased. Car accident 7 years ago, when Julian was barely a year old. Tragic loss. Billionaire widower left to raise son alone. The usual sympathetic coverage that rich men always received. But Julian's note said his real mom came on Thursdays. Maya stared at those words until her bus arrived. She read them again on the ride home, and once more when she finally collapsed onto her worn couch in her tiny apartment. Her mother was already asleep, early shift at the hospital tomorrow. Maya was grateful. She had no idea what she'd say if anyone asked her how her night went. Because how do you explain that a child just handed you a secret that made no sense? Caroline Whitmore was dead. The internet said so. The news said so. Every article agreed. So who was coming on Thursdays? Maya barely slept. When morning finally came, she called in sick to her coffee shop shift, something she never did, but she couldn't focus on lattes and customer service when her mind was spinning. She spent the day in the library, using their computers to dig deeper. Caroline Whitmore's death had been covered extensively. Single car accident on a rainy night. She'd lost control on a winding road, hit a tree. No other vehicles involved. She'd been found hours later, dead at the scene. Except, Maya clicked through article after article, looking for something, anything that felt off. And then she found it. A small piece, published 2 weeks after the main coverage died down. Just 3 paragraphs in a local paper, easily missed. Questions raised about Whitmore accident scene. The article mentioned inconsistencies in the police report, suggesting the investigation wasn't as thorough as it should have been. But then nothing. No follow-up. The story simply disappeared. She sat back, staring at the screen. Rich people made inconvenient things disappear all the time. Everyone knew that. But making a whole person disappear? Making everyone believe someone was dead when they weren't? That was different. Maya accepted every babysitting job the Whitmores offered over the next 3 weeks. Tuesday nights, Thursday nights, even a Saturday afternoon. Each time, she watched Julian carefully. He was always perfectly behaved, always controlled. But on Thursdays, something changed. He was lighter somehow, less like a wind-up toy going through program motions. His drawings on Thursday nights were brighter, fuller of life. And he hummed, quietly, under his breath, like he didn't even realize he was doing it. "You seem happy today," Maya said one Thursday evening, 3 weeks after the note. Julian's pencil paused over his paper. "Do I?" "Yeah. Did something good happen?" His eyes met hers, searching, testing. "Do you remember your promise?" Maya's pulse quickened. Every word. Then nothing happened. Nothing ever happens here. But the corner of his mouth lifted slightly, and Maya understood. Whatever happened on Thursdays, Julian protected it fiercely. She made her decision during the bus ride home that night. She had to know. Not for some noble reason. Not because she was a hero. Because a child had trusted her with his secret, and that secret was eating her alive. The following Thursday, Maya called in sick to all her classes. She'd never done that before. Her scholarship depended on perfect attendance, but this couldn't wait. She took 3 buses to reach the Whitmore estate, positioning herself across the street behind a row of hedges where she could see the side entrance Julian had once mentioned, the one the staff used. She waited 4 hours. Her legs cramped. Her stomach growled. She was about to give up, convinced she'd made a terrible mistake, when the door opened. An older woman emerged first. Maya recognized her. Rosa, one of the housekeepers. She'd been kind the few times they'd crossed paths, always offering Maya something to eat, commenting on how thin she looked. Rosa glanced around quickly, then nodded back toward the house. A woman stepped out. Maya's breath stopped. She was thin, almost fragile, with dark hair streaked with gray. She wore simple jeans and a sweater, clothes that had seen better days. She carried a canvas bag over one shoulder, the kind you got free at grocery stores. Nothing about her screamed wealth or privilege. But her face, even from across the street, even though 7 years in grief had carved new lines into it, Maya recognized her from the photos online. Caroline Whitmore was alive. Maya watched her walk down the street, hunched slightly like she was trying to make herself smaller. When Caroline turned the corner, Maya followed. She stayed far enough back that she wouldn't be noticed, close enough that she wouldn't lose her. They walked for 6 blocks. Then Caroline descended into a subway station. Maya followed her onto the train, sitting 3 seats away. Caroline stared out the window, lost in thought, occasionally touching the canvas bag like she was checking on something precious inside. They rode for 30 minutes before Caroline got off in a neighborhood Maya barely recognized. Working class. Warm but honest. Nothing like the Whitmore estate. Caroline walked to a small apartment building, the kind with rusted fire escapes and tired brick. She climbed to the third floor. Maya waited across the street, watching lights flick on in a corner unit. Through the window, she could see Caroline pull items from her bag. Books. A child's drawings. She held one up to the light, smiling, and Maya saw tears on her cheeks. She stood there for 10 minutes, maybe 15, trying to decide. Then she crossed the street and climbed those stairs before she could talk herself out of it. Her hand shook as she knocked. The door opened. Caroline's smile vanished instantly, replaced by pure terror. Who are you? Did Richard send you? Please, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm Maya. I babysit Julian. The words tumbled out too fast. He gave me a note. About Thursdays. About you. Caroline's face went white. She grabbed Maya's arm and pulled her inside, slamming the door. You can't be here. If Richard finds out, if anyone sees you, please. I just need to understand. Everyone thinks you're dead. I am dead. Caroline's voice cracked. That's the deal. That's what I agreed to. The apartment was tiny, probably a quarter the size of Julian's bedroom. But it was warm. Lived in. Photos covered one wall, all of Julian. Baby photos, school pictures, candid shots that must have been taken from a distance. A shrine to a child she wasn't allowed to claim. Sit down, Caroline said finally, her shoulders sagging. If you're here, if Julian told you, then you deserve the truth. But you have to promise me something first. What? That you won't tell him I cried when I talk about this. He worries too much already. 8 years old, and he worries like an adult. Her voice broke on the last word. That's what they've done to him. My baby, and they've made him so serious, so scared. I promise. Caroline sank into a worn armchair, gesturing for Maya to take the couch. The accident was real. The injuries were real. I spent 4 months in the hospital. Broken bones, internal bleeding, traumatic brain injury. When I finally woke up, Julian was almost 2 years old. 2 years I'd lost. Maya leaned forward, afraid to speak and break whatever spell was allowing Caroline to tell this story. I couldn't walk at first. I couldn't remember things. The doctors said I had PTSD from the crash, depression from the trauma. I had panic attacks so severe I'd black out. Richard visited twice. Twice in 4 months. The second time, he brought lawyers. What did they want? They told me I was unfit. That Julian needed stability, not a mother who couldn't remember his name half the time. Caroline's hands twisted together in her lap. They showed me videos of myself, screaming at nurses, throwing things, calling for Julian during episodes where I thought he was in danger. I don't remember any of it, but it was there. Evidence. That's not your fault. You were traumatized, recovering. I know that now. I didn't then. Caroline stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Richard's lawyers explained my options. Fight for custody, and lose they'd make sure of it. My medical records alone would destroy any case. They painted me as a violent woman. Unstable, dangerous. Julian would grow up thinking his mother was a monster who chose pride over his welfare. Or take the deal. $2 million. Sign away all parental rights. Agree to a confidentiality agreement. Most importantly, let everyone believe I died in that accident. Richard would tell Julian I'd loved him but couldn't survive my injuries. A tragedy, but clean. No messy custody battles. No reporters. No one questioned Richard's fitness to raise Julian alone. Maya felt sick. You were barely recovering. They took advantage. They gave me an out. Caroline's voice was hollow. That's how I saw it then. I was broken. I couldn't take care of myself, let alone a toddler. The money would pay for treatment, therapy, whatever I needed to get better. And Julian would have everything. The best schools, the best life. I told myself I was being selfless. But you didn't stay away. Caroline turned from the window, and her expression cracked open. Raw pain flooded through. I tried. God, I tried. I took the money, signed the papers, went to therapy, got better, built a life, or something like it. Worked as a library assistant, lived quietly. But every birthday, every milestone, I'd see photos in the news. Richard trotting Julian out for photo ops. And my son looked so alone. She crossed to the wall of photos, touching one gently. Julian at maybe 6 years old, standing beside Richard at some charity event. Even in the grainy newsprint, you could see the tension in the child's shoulders. 6 months ago I broke. I contacted Rosa. She'd been with us since before Julian was born, helped me through my first trimester when I couldn't keep anything down. I begged her, just let me see him once. Just let me know he's okay. And she agreed. She took one look at me and started crying. Said Julian barely smiled anymore. Said the house felt like a tomb. Said Catherine treated him like an obligation and Richard treated him like a project. Caroline's voice strengthened. Rosa said I looked better than I had in years, and maybe it was time to stop punishing myself. So you started coming on Thursdays. When Richard and Catherine have their standing business meetings. When the house is quietest. Rosa lets me in through the side entrance. We have 2 hours. Caroline pulled a drawing from her bag, smoothing it carefully. Look what he made me last week. It was a picture of a woman and a boy holding hands. The sun was shining. They were both smiling. In a child's careful letters at the bottom, me and Mama C. Maya's eyes burned. He knows who you are. He figured it out on the 3rd visit. I never told him. I was pretending to be Rosa's sister, just visiting. But Julian looked at me and said, you have the same eyes as my mom in the pictures. The ones father put away. Caroline's voice broke completely. He asked if I was a ghost. If that's why it had to be secret. What did you tell him? The truth. That I'd been sick for a very long time, but I was better now. That I'd made a mistake agreeing to stay away. That I loved him more than anything in the world. Tears streamed down Caroline's face. He asked if I was real, if he could touch me. I held him and he sobbed. He's 8 years old, and he sobbed like his heart was breaking because his mother wasn't dead. Maya couldn't stop her own tears. Caroline, this isn't right. You should have access to your son. Real access, not stolen hours. And say what? I signed legal documents. I took money to disappear. Richard's lawyers would bury me, and Julian would be caught in the middle of a war. Caroline wiped her face roughly. At least this way, he knows I love him. He knows I didn't choose to leave. It's not perfect, but it's something. He deserves more than something. You both do. What I deserve and what I can have are two different things. Caroline sat back down, exhausted. Why are you here, Maya? Really? What did you think you'd find? Maya thought about the eviction notice she'd paid with the babysitting money. About her mother working double shifts to keep them afloat. About how she understood, maybe better than most people, what it meant to be powerless against money and systems designed to crush you. I thought I'd find answers. Now I don't know what I found. Then forget you came here. Forget you saw me. Keep babysitting Julian. Be kind to him. God knows he needs kindness in that house, but don't get involved. Caroline's eyes were desperate. Promise me. Maya stood slowly. I should go. That's not a promise. No, it's not. She left Caroline sitting in that small apartment, surrounded by photos of a child she could only love in secret. Maya walked for an hour before catching a bus, her mind spinning. When she finally got home, her mother was in the kitchen making tea. You look terrible, her mother said. Worse than after finals. Maya collapsed at their tiny table. Mom, if you had to choose between doing what was legal and doing what was right, which would you pick? Her mother set down 2 mugs, studying Maya's face. That's a heavy question for a Thursday night. It's important. Then here's my answer. The law is written by people with power to protect people with power. Right and wrong. That's something else. That's what you do when nobody's watching, when there's no reward. Her mother reached across the table, squeezing Maya's hand. Why? What's going on? I'm babysitting this kid. Julian. His family is wealthy. Really wealthy. And I found out his mom isn't dead like everyone thinks. She's alive, and she's not allowed to see him except in secret because she signed away her rights when she was vulnerable and traumatized. Her mother was quiet for a long moment. What does the boy want? That stopped Maya cold. What? The boy. Julian. What does he want? Because that's whose life this is. Maya thought about Julian's drawings. The way he lit up on Thursday nights. How he'd asked if his mother was a ghost. I don't know. I never asked him. Then maybe that's where you start. Maya met with Caroline 3 days later at a coffee shop far from both their neighborhoods. Caroline looked terrified, jumping every time the door opened. You shouldn't be here. If someone sees us together. We need a plan, Maya interrupted. I talked to Julian. He wants you in his life. Really in his life. That's impossible. Why? Because you signed papers when you were traumatized? Because Richard has better lawyers. Maya leaned forward. Here's what I know. You're a fit parent now. You have a stable job, stable housing. You've been receiving treatment. You've been seeing your son regularly for 6 months, and he's thriving from it. I've watched the difference in him on Thursday nights. Any reasonable court would grant you visitation at minimum. Caroline's hands shook around her coffee cup. Richard would destroy me. He'd drag every mistake I made during my recovery through the media. He'd paint me as an unfit mother who abandoned her son for money. He'd make Julian watch it all happen, or he'd settle quietly to avoid that exact scenario. Maya pulled out her phone. I've been researching. Richard Whitmore's company is about to go public. His image is everything right now. The last thing he needs is a custody battle splashed across headlines. Billionaire forced traumatized wife to fake death isn't great PR. You don't understand what you're suggesting. These people, they don't play fair. Neither do I. Maya met Caroline's eyes. I'll testify. About Julian's emotional state. About what I've observed in that house. About the lack of genuine parental connection. I'm a mandatory reporter as a child care provider. If I believe a child is suffering emotional neglect, I have a responsibility. He's not being neglected. He is everything, except the one thing he needs most. His mother. Maya's voice softened. Caroline, I've watched you two together through that window. I've seen how he lights up. How you light up. That's not nothing. That's everything. And I think if we present this right, if we make Richard understand that this can be quiet and cooperative or loud and messy, he'll choose quiet. Caroline was crying again. What if I lose? What if they take away even Thursdays? What if you win? What if Julian gets to live with a parent who actually loves him? Both parents love him. Does Richard? Really? Or does he love the idea of having an heir to his empire? Maya had been watching the Whitmores for months now. I've never seen him ask Julian about his feelings, his interests, his dreams. Everything is about performance and achievement. Caroline stared into her coffee. When Julian was born, Richard held him for about 30 seconds before handing him to the nanny. He had a conference call. I remember thinking it was just bad timing, that he'd be more present later. But later never came. He loved Julian in theory. In practice, our son was an interruption. Then do this. For Julian. For yourself. File for visitation rights. I'll support your case. We'll make it clear you're not trying to disrupt Julian's life. Just be part of it. What's Richard going to argue? That a child shouldn't see his loving, stable, recovered mother? He'll argue I'm legally dead. That I took money to disappear. Contract signed under duress by a woman recovering from traumatic brain injury. With Richard's lawyers pressuring you. I bet a good attorney could challenge that. Maya pulled out a business card she'd been carrying for 2 days. This is a family law attorney who does pro bono cases. I already called her. She wants to talk to you. Caroline took the card with shaking hands. Why are you doing this? You barely know us. Because Julian trusted me with his secret. Because I know what it's like to be one bad day away from losing everything. Because I watched an 8-year-old boy cry when he talked about his mother, and I can't unsee that. Maya stood. Think about it. But think fast. Julian's running out of childhood. She left Caroline at that table, uncertain if she'd just helped or made everything worse. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept imagining all the ways this could go wrong. Richard's lawyers crushing Caroline. Julian being punished for the adult's choices. Her own life imploded when Richard Whitmore decided to retaliate against the babysitter who'd interfered. Her phone buzzed at 2 in the morning. A text from an unknown number. It's Caroline. Rosa gave me your number. I called the attorney. We're meeting Monday. Thank you for believing we deserve a chance. Maya texted back. You deserve more than a chance. You deserve your son. And he deserves you. The next Tuesday, Maya arrived at the Whitmore estate with a knot in her stomach. Julian was waiting in the kitchen as usual, his homework spread out in perfect order. They worked through math problems and vocabulary words, and then Maya pulled out her drawing supplies. Can we talk about something serious? She asked. Julian's whole body tensed. Did I do something wrong? No. God, no. You did something brave. Maya took a breath. I met your mom. Your real mom. Caroline. The pencil fell from Julian's hand, clattering against the marble. You promised not to tell. I'm not telling them. I'm telling you. Maya kept her voice gentle. I followed her home. I talked to her. And now I need to ask you something important. What do you want, Julian? If you could have anything, what would it be? He stared at her, eyes wide. That's not how life works. Pretend it is. Just for a minute. Julian's lips trembled. He looked toward the doorway, then back at Maya. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I want my mom. My real mom. I want her to live here, or I want to live with her. I don't care which. I want to come home from tutoring and tell her about my day. I want her to tuck me in at night. I want to stop pretending everything is fine when it's not." His voice rose with each word, years of controlled emotion finally cracking through. "Father barely talks to me. Catherine is nice enough, but she looks at me like I'm furniture she has to dust. Rosa is kind, but she's staff. She can't." He stopped abruptly, pressing his palms against his eyes. "I'm not supposed to complain. I have everything. Father says people would kill for my opportunities." Maya moved around the island and knelt beside his chair. "Having money doesn't mean you have everything. It doesn't mean you have what matters. But I signed papers too. When I was 6, Father's lawyers came and they explained that Catherine would be my legal guardian if anything happened to him. And I had to agree. They said my real mom would have wanted that. They said she'd want me to be grateful." A sob broke through. "I didn't know she was alive. I didn't know I could have asked for her instead. You were 6. You didn't sign anything that matters. You were a child. I'm still a child." Julian looked at her, and the weight in his eyes was unbearable. "But I feel old. I feel tired all the time. Is that normal?" Maya's heart shattered. "No, sweetheart. That's not normal at all." "I thought so." He wiped his face with his sleeve. "Can you fix it? Can you make it so I can see my mom for real? Not just Thursdays. Not just in secret. I don't know, but I'm going to try. Is that okay?" "Father will be angry." "Probably. You could lose your job. I've lost jobs before." Julian studied her face for a long moment. Then he wrapped his arms around her neck and held on tight. "Thank you for asking what I wanted. Nobody ever asks me that." The waiting was torture. Maya kept babysitting on her scheduled nights, acting normal even though everything had changed. Julian knew something was happening, and she could see it in the way he watched her, hopeful and terrified. She wanted to promise him it would all work out, but she'd learned young that some promises were too big to make. 3 weeks later, Caroline filed a petition for visitation rights. The response was immediate and brutal. Maya arrived for a Tuesday shift to find Richard Whitmore waiting in the kitchen. No Catherine. No Julian. Just Richard and a woman in an expensive suit that screamed lawyer. "Miss James, sit down." Maya's legs felt weak, but she stayed standing. "Where's Julian?" "With his actual family. We need to discuss your employment." Richard's face was carved from ice. "My attorney has informed me that you've been communicating with a woman claiming to be my deceased wife. That you've been encouraging her delusions and involving yourself in family matters that are none of your concern. Julian's well-being is my concern. I care about him. You're a babysitter. You're here to supervise homework and ensure he eats dinner. You're not here to play detective or therapist." Richard leaned forward. Caroline signed away her rights. She took substantial compensation. She agreed to stay away. End of story. She was traumatized, coerced. She was given options and made her choice. The lawyer spoke for the first time, her voice crisp. "Miss Chun, you're interfering in a legally settled matter. If you continue, we'll pursue harassment charges. We'll also ensure you never work with children again." Maya's heart hammered. "You'd rather destroy me than let Julian see his mother?" "I'd rather protect my son from instability. From a woman who proved herself unfit years ago." Richard stood, towering over her. "This conversation is over. You're terminated effective immediately. If you contact Caroline again, if you come near my family, we'll take legal action." He left. The lawyer stayed long enough to have Maya sign a termination agreement, then walked her to the door. Maya stood on that perfect driveway, hands shaking with rage and fear. Then she texted her mother. "I might have just ruined my life." Her mother called immediately. "What happened?" Maya explained everything as she walked to the bus stop. When she finished, her mother was quiet for a long moment. She texted Caroline immediately. "They fired me. They're going to fight hard. Don't give up." But Maya wasn't giving up either. She contacted Anaya, a journalism student from her school who'd been looking for a breakthrough story. Together with Caroline and Rosa, they compiled everything. The coerced contracts, the medical records, Julian's own words about wanting his mother. When Anaya's article went live, it exploded. Social media erupted with outrage. How dare a billionaire use his wealth to separate a child from his loving mother? The pressure on Richard was immense. His company's IPO got delayed. Investors grew nervous. 2 weeks after the story broke, Richard's attorney called Caroline with an offer. He'd agree to visitation if she signed an NDA. "No NDA," Caroline said firmly. "The truth is already out. I want regular visitation, overnight stays, and acknowledgement that I was coerced. Or we go to court with even more media attention. It took 6 more weeks of negotiation, but finally they reached an agreement. Caroline would have visitation every Thursday and every other weekend. After 6 months, they'd revisit custody arrangements. And most importantly, Richard would publicly acknowledge that Caroline had signed her original agreement under duress. The first official visit happened on a Thursday. Caroline called Maya afterward, her voice shaking with joy. "I can see my son. Really see him. Not in secret. I can be his mother again." "You did it," Maya said, sitting on a campus bench, overwhelmed. "We did it. You, Rosa, Anaya, everyone who refused to let Richard buy his way out of the truth." 3 months later, Maya graduated. Caroline, Rosa, and her mother all attended. Julian couldn't come. It was a school day, but he'd drawn a congratulations card that Maya treasured. After the ceremony, Caroline pulled her aside. "Julian wants you to come to dinner next week. At my apartment. He says you started this, so you should see how it turns out." The dinner was chaotic and perfect. Julian talked nonstop, making up for years of enforced silence. He showed Maya his rock collection, his drawings, his report card with normal grades because Caroline had convinced Richard to ease the pressure. As Maya left that night, Julian hugged her at the door. "Thank you for asking what I wanted. Nobody had ever done that before. You deserve to be asked. Everyone does, right?" His eyes were bright, hopeful. Everyone deserves to have someone care what they want. Maya thought about struggling students and traumatized mothers and housekeepers who'd sacrificed their jobs for truth. Yeah, everyone deserves that. And sometimes, if you're lucky, someone cares enough to help you get it. 6 months later, the custody arrangement evolved. Julian spent weekdays with Richard, who'd started leaving work early once a week for actual father-son time. Weekends belonged to Caroline, who'd moved to a bigger apartment with a second bedroom painted blue at Julian's request. Maya still saw them occasionally at Julian's soccer games. Watching him play with other kids, laughing freely, being 8 instead of acting 40, it made everything worth it. One Saturday, Caroline called. "I have something for you. Can you meet me?" At the coffee shop, Caroline handed her an envelope. Inside was a check for $20,000. "Caroline, I can't. It's not for me." When the story came out, people started a fund for everyone who helped us. "This is your share." Maya stared at the check. $20,000. Her student loans. Her mother's medical bills. A future that suddenly felt possible. "There's something else," Caroline said softly. "Julian wants to know if you'll be his big sister. Not legally, just in the ways that matter. He says you're family." Maya's vision blurred. "I'd be honored." She walked home through the evening air, thinking about a folded note from a lonely child. About how one secret, trusted to the right person, could change everything. About how sometimes the bravest thing you could do was simply ask someone what they wanted, and then fight like hell to help them get it. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories. Drop a comment below telling us what you would have done in Maya's situation. Would you have gotten involved or played it safe? Your thoughts matter to us, and we read every single comment. Remember, sometimes the smallest acts of courage create the biggest changes. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.